All right, so let's talk about deal structure. How do we set something like this up? We want to go buy this land or this house and go to get this loan and potentially maybe bring on an investor. How do we put all this together? So let's talk about this in two different kind of sides. Okay, the actual like entities, the actual companies that will own this. How do we set this up? So I'll tell you what I did for myself. And don't copy exactly what I did. This is what my attorney recommended for me, and I'm in Texas. But go talk to your attorney. What do they recommend? You really have two businesses when you're doing assisted living. If you own the real estate, you have a real estate business on one side and you have an operations business on the other side. And they're separate from each other. I do not keep them together in one company. I want to separate my real estate because that's where a lot of my equity is going to be from my operations, where there's going to be more risk, but there's going to be strong cash flow. So really, I have two LLCs. Okay, and for me, this is the way I set it up. I have an LLC that owns the real estate. Okay, that real estate company or that piece of land that has a building on it is owned by a real estate LLC. That real estate LLC is owned by a holding company, and then that holding company is owned by myself and my wife, right? So we have a layer between us, and our holding company will also own other LLCs that therefore own other properties. So again, talk to your attorney about this, someone who can set up some asset planning stuff for you. But this is an example for you of how it was set up for me, right? So real property, the land, the building is owned by an LLC. I really don't have other assets in that LLC. It's just one that owns that. One LLC owns that one piece of real property. Then from there, it's owned by a holding company, and that holding company may own other LLCs with real property in it, but the holding company does not own actual assets. It doesn't own real property. It just owns companies that own real property, right? And then above that is myself. That's where you can bring in your real person, your personal name, and then is owning that holding company. So that's on one side of it. It's similar on the other side. The operations company is the other side. So this is the company, and for me, it's an LLC that owns the assisted living, right? So my grandmas and grandpas, they're paying rent to that company. And I'm paying all my staff and everything out of there. My insurance and everything's separate from the operations side, from the real property side, right? My liability is really on this side. And I want to separate that. I want my risk kind of over here in this one category against and away from the potential equity build that I have of potentially a lot of money as the property, the real property, the value of the building appreciates. So I want to separate those two things. So, right, so again, same type of concept where it may be the local LLC that owns your operations company, that it can be owned by a operations holding company. It doesn't have to. You talk to your attorney about that, and either that is owned by yourself personally, or maybe you bring in a management company in between those two things, or it's a holding company that's owned by yourself, or the management company that's owned by yourself. Kind of the same type of buffer between the two things. So talk to someone who can advise you locally for what your state will want to set that up. But that's really how I set up my entities. The other thing I want to say in there, because they're separated, there has to be a way to send money back and forth, right? And what I mean by this is your operations company collects all the income. All your income comes through there, right? Your grandmas and grandpas are paying rent to you, to this operations company. Okay, so you have to have a way to get that money to the real estate side, because the real estate side is the one that has the debt. It is the one that pays the mortgage. So you can't pay the mortgage if all the money's on this side, right? On the operations side. So I have a triple net lease between the two. Really, it's just me signing on one side of the lease and me signing on the other side of the lease, but you can set it up however you like. So again, go and talk to a local attorney for your specific state on how to set this up. But ultimately, this works in a way where my operations company is collecting the rent. I'm paying all my staff, I'm paying all my utilities and everything from that operations company, and then I'm paying rent. I'm paying rent from my operations company to my real estate company. And you can have multiple choices here of what you want to pay for rent. Do you want to pay strictly the smallest amount and just do the mortgage and the taxes and insurance and maybe a little bit of CPA cost on the side there, and so that really that company breaks even? Or do you want to put in a higher amount? Right? Do you want to save money in that real estate company? Because potentially, talk to your CPA, they may be taxed differently. One may be more of an active company, one may be more of a passive company. And that's how mine is set up, where I have different tax rates that I will pay based on the activity of these businesses. So that is something also to consider. What do you want to pay for rent? It can be market rent. It could be any number you really choose to be. You can set it up as long as it's, you have to consider what your partners are gonna say in this deal. But if you don't have any partners, if it's just you, then set it up however you like. So now let's transition. Let's talk about the next part of this. If you are gonna set this up, you want deal structure for raising money. You went to a local bank, you got maybe some type of loan for this, and you wanted to raise those gap money, right? You wanted to bring on an investor partner or investor who wants to invest in either equity or debt, either one, right? This is how you can potentially set this up. Let's talk about debt first. If you're going to bring on a partner and they're going to be a debt partner, right? Meaning they're just giving a loan, they're not really going to have equity. They would be in a second position or third position or however many loans you have after the primary loan, right? The big loan, the bank, if they're going to give you 80, 90%, they're going to be in first position. And you may have to ask them whether you can bring in money like this or whether you need it in an equity position because you need it as part of your down payment. You have to talk to the bank about that. Let's just assume you can do this. You're bringing in somebody for this debt position, and they're in a second position after the bank. Here's some of the terms you should be prepared so that when you make your offer, you can talk to them about. The terms are how long is this loan going to be, right? I mean, obviously your first loan with the bank is either 25, 30 years. It's a long-term loan. Are they expecting to have that money in for that amount of time? You need to tell them what it's going to be. So in my opinion, I like 2 to 5 years because one, you don't want it to be too short. If you were lending the money and you're pulling it out of something, right? Like maybe it's just sitting in your bank, but hopefully not. Maybe you're pulling it out of some other investment. Now you're not making money and you don't want it back right away. You want to make the money. So I don't like it to be too short, right? So I may say, okay, we'll have a minimum of 2 years. That way you're not having, dead time with your money where it's not making more money. But what's the max amount of time? 5 years may be a good idea, or maybe it's 7 years, or maybe it's 10, whatever it is for you. You can set up these terms, and then this is a starting negotiation point. So here's some of the things you should consider, right? How long are they going to want it? Their money out there. They're not going to want it out forever, right? Like 30 years is probably too long. So what does that look like for you? Because you may say, hey, at that point, we're going to sell or we're going to refinance, or I'll have saved up that much cash that I'll just pay you off, however you want to set that up. And then interest, right? If they're in a debt position, they're not getting equity. They're not getting a percentage of the cash flow and the profits. They're getting interest. They're getting some type of rate. So what does that look like? Right? It should probably be higher than the first position loan, maybe not, because they are in a higher position of risk. But what does that interest look like? And then potentially another option is profit sharing. Do you want to have a profit sharing agreement as well? So I guess let me kind of separate the two things, right? We talked about you have two separate companies that we set up. You have your real estate company and you have your operations company. So the debt is against the real property. That's against the real estate, right? So if someone brought in, 200 grand and they're filling in the gap money and they're in a second position to the bank, that note and deed of trust is in second position against the real property, against the real estate company, not against the operations company. Now you may set something up like that in addition to, but they're going to want to be collateralized against real property, real estate. That means that they're getting interest payments from the real estate company. Okay, just like you're paying the bank, you're paying them also. But the other part of it is you have the other company, right? It has a triple net lease that has all the cash flow. That's where you're making most of your profit. You're getting paid by the grandmas and grandpas, paying your staff and all your utilities and expenses, and then there's profit there. You can potentially set up a profit sharing agreement. You don't have to, but it's another option. Maybe it's a little kicker or a bonus to incentivize them to do the deal. And maybe they're getting interest rate that's guaranteed. It's collateralized against real property, and they're getting some kind of profit sharing agreement. And you can set that up for indefinitely. You can set it up for as long as they're in the deal. You can set it up however you like. And I've done those type of deals and found a great win-win with this because they're going to get two things. The investor's going to get the fixed rate of return. It's guaranteed and it's safe, and they're going to get the bonus of, hey, you're going to share with me in the win when I win, and you're going to get a percentage of this with a profit sharing agreement. You can set it up really however you like, but there's some examples for you. Now let's go to the other side of this. If you said to this same person, hey, I want you to invest, this $200,000 in this example, and instead of having a debt position, you're having an equity position, and it may be that if you need, like say, the $200,000 and it's the down payment you need, it may not be allowed to be in a debt position because it's just more debt, and then you really don't have the down payment you're putting down, right? So if someone is an investor, they're part of the company, now it's really down payment. It's really the 10 or 20% you're putting down. They are going to put this money down, and you're going to give them equity. Now, again, we talked about it, right? You have two companies. You have the real estate company and you have the operations company. So they're for sure going to be in the real estate company because that's real property. That's what they're putting the money into. Now, you can set up the operations company at the same time and say, okay, you're going to have this percent of the real estate company and this percent of the operations company, or it doesn't have to be. You are in the driver's seat, right? You create what your ideal offer is, and then you're going to present it to them, and then you're open to negotiations. But I want you to understand that they're not tied together. The real estate and the operations are not tied together. If you say, I'm going to give you X percent of the real estate, you don't also have to give X percent of the operations. It could be 0% of the operations, or it can be something totally different number, all right? It could be Y. Or you could give them X percent of the real estate company and have a profit sharing agreement like we talked about in the previous example, where they don't own part of the operations company, but they have a profit sharing agreement, and they're going to get part of that spread. So you can set this up however you like. So talk about these different terms, really equity. What about management? Again, if you're the operator, I want you to have the managing decision. So make sure that you have in your operating agreement the ability to have these final says, or what percentage of voting rights. Make sure that maybe your spouse included, or however you set it up, have the ability to run the business and not have someone sabotage you. And then talk about selling. What is your timeline? Are we building this, stabilizing it, and selling it? Are we building it, stabilizing, refinancing it? How long do I want to run this for? How long would my money potentially be in there for? And then what happens if you die, right? How do you set this up? You can put all these things in an operating agreement. How do you set this up? So a lot of different things can be done here, and I want to say that you can really set it up however you like. I would talk to maybe your local attorney about it. You can use some of these things that I talked to you about, some examples from. These are all things that I have done. And I think it's a lot of fun to be able to kind of just play and find some type of deal together with someone, find some type of win-win where, again, you can both win and you can share and you can do a great deal. So that is us wrapping up the deal structure.